Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 7 injury report and DFS ownership and chalk and pivot plays. Coming up a little bit later on with Ryan Hodge of the Power Hour Pod and 4for4.com. It's a great convo, already recorded it, and we'll get to a lot of the actual situational play out of some of these injuries and how that pertains to both DraftKings and your season-long formats. But I'm just going to do a quick run through of guys that we're watching for right now in terms of the injury report. Let's start with the guys that have already been ruled out for the week, so get them out of your lineups right now. And starting off, we're going to have Paul Perkins with his rib problem. He's out. Charles Clay, Emmanuel Sanders, Luke Kuechly in his concussion will not play against the Chicago Bears, allowing for a bit more room for Jordan Howard to run up the middle a little bit. Hurts the run defense substantially. Good spot for the +3 Chicago Bears at home in that game. Robert Turbin will not play, leaving more snaps for Marlon Mack. Sam Bradford will not play for the Minnesota Vikings, meaning Case Keenum gets another start. Teddy Bridgewater can start practicing again. So they've already said that Sam Bradford is not ruled out for the year, which is good news because there was a chance that, at the beginning of the week that he was going to play. So that's kind of odd. Tyler Boyd will not play with his knee problem. John Ross expected back. Terrence West will be inactive for the Baltimore Ravens. The split between Buck Allen and Alex Collins continues. Corey Davis has been ruled out for the Tennessee Titans, and Brashad Perriman will not play for the Ravens. Now, where this gets a bit trickier is the guys whose status is in doubt for the week. And the big one, we heard about Fournette. He's going to be a game-time decision. We'll get more about Chris Ivory a little bit later on. Ditto for DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. Fortunately, those guys play in the 1 o'clock game, so you're going to know before the games actually kick off whether they're playing or not. You want to make a preemptive strike right now. Chris Ivory still available in a ton of season-long formats. He is a must-add right now and a must-start if Leonard Fournette sits. But again, we're not going to know that until Sunday. Same as DeMarco Murray. Even if DeMarco Murray plays, I still prefer Derrick Henry in this spot. Although last time this happened, DeMarco Murray had his hamstring injury, came back and was absolutely fine. But both the Jags and Titans go on to bye week in Week 8, so it makes a lot of sense to sit them out and get their elite players healthy. Leonard Fournette is the best player that Jacksonville has on offense by a substantial margin. Having him limited throughout the course of a few weeks would be a terrible decision. So get the guy healthy, retain your playoff chances. Maybe your defense can beat the Colts for you. And Chris Ivory has not looked bad in limited play so far, and maybe that's because Fournette has been breaking down the defenses, but he's looking like a really good volume play. Not a running back one. He'll fall behind like Jay Ajayi and Jordan Howard in terms of those volume guys. He's more in that like Adrian Peterson range. I actually like him a little bit more based on what he can do in the receiving game and how Jacksonville has been using him. However, the big one, and this is just kind of coming across my feed right now, Keenan Allen didn't practice on Friday. That's not good news because generally speaking, you don't practice Friday, you do not play on Sunday, and he's been trending down all week from active to limited to not practicing. That means a substantial bump for Tyrell Williams and Hunter Henry in this game against the Broncos. Now, the Broncos still have a very good pass defense, so maybe someone like Travis Benjamin is a flyer, maybe Mike Williams gets more involved, but I think this is just setting up more and more and more for a giant Melvin Gordon usage range. Cash games, your season-long lineups, Melvin Gordon is a smash play this week, and he's underpriced on DraftKings. For a guy who's been the highest DraftKings scorer the last 2 weeks, $7,000? Yeah, I'm going to sign up for that one on the dot. You can use them in a correlation play with the Chargers defense as well, because 2 of the linemen of the Broncos are already out. The Chargers have a top 5 pass rush, and the Broncos were bottom 10 in offensive line in terms of adjusted sack rate. Anyway, it's shaping up to be a really nice spot. Let the defense create short fields, and boom, Melvin Gordon's going to be fine. Another really interesting, doubtful guy for Week 7, Delanie Walker. The Titans are kind of banged up right now. This bye couldn't come at a better time for them in this matchup against the Browns, where, frankly, they probably won't need their A game to beat the Browns. Although that spread is super tricky at 5.5. Not sure why it's that low. Maybe they knew about these injuries. I'm not sure. But if Delanie Walker doesn't play, and what is the best matchup of the season for him, the Browns are the worst against tight ends, Jonnu Smith is someone to look at. He's $2,600 on DraftKings. I think he's a very nice GPP play. I would not use him in cash games, but if you're looking for a tight end streamer, that is someone to look at. Supernaw is going to be involved, but he plays the majority of his snaps on special teams, might vulture a touchdown, killing all Smith's upside. But when we look at Smith, he's been playing over 60% of the snaps the last 2 weeks anyway. I feel like he's the one going to be on the field the most to replace Delaney Walker. Not officially out, but not looking promising for his status on Sunday. More doubtful guys. Adam Jones for the Bengals looks like he is not going to play, which just leaves the door open for Antonio Brown. Jones has been one of the few cornerbacks to have success against Antonio Brown and limiting him, not shutting him down, limiting his giant upside, but he's not going to be there, so just fire up some Antonio Brown. Even if you have to pay all the way up for him in cash games, no big deal on that front. Devontae Parker looks like he's not going to play. Smash Jarvis Landry wherever. I don't care if he's going to be chalk. He's going to see like 45% market share and probably garner around 12 to 15 targets. That's a guy that you want to play, especially in PPR formats. Mike Wallace looks like he's not going to play, and Brashad Perriman already been dealt out. Jeremy Maclin will have a substantial role. He's dealing with a shoulder problem, but he's probably going to play. The other guy to watch for there, Chris Moore. Chris Moore garnered 7 targets last week, and if we know anything about the Minnesota defense, they're going to limit the wide receiver 1 substantially. So Ben Watson and Chris Moore could be in a decent spot if you're playing in a deep format or looking for just guys that no one is going to play. The upside isn't super high, but they could have a nice floor for PPR scoring. That's something that I always like to target. So Chris Moore is a guy to keep on your radar for that circumstance. The last guy, Andre Ellington, hasn't practiced the last 2 days. Looks like he's not going to go in the London game, leaving the door for Adrian Peterson to come in and smash. I know everyone's all over him. I think he's a nice fade on DraftKings, although the Rams defense is quite susceptible to running the ball, but this is all just a game flow thing. I'm not sold that Adrian Peterson will continue to stay in the game if the Cardinals get down. Now, before, it would be Andre Ellington who would just come on the field because he's very game script dependent. Now, that could be Adrian Peterson in this circumstance, but it's not necessarily the case. They could use Kerwin Williams in that spot. They could use Elijah Penny in that spot. I really don't know about that situation, but we know that Adrian Peterson is not the most versatile guy in the passing game. So if the Cardinals do choose to go in that direction, AP might see the bench. That's all I'm saying. Just watch out for that circumstance. That's why he's lower in my rankings than a lot of other guys who are expected to see the same sort of volume on the ground. The actual questionables, guys that look like they're going to play this week, we got Sterling Shepard, we got Jameis Winston, Wendell Smallwood, CJ Prosciutto is back. He's my favorite start in the Seattle backfield, by the way. Smallwood would come after Blunt, but I still think that Smallwood is a nice season-long pickup just to see where his role goes to. Kenyon Barner was playing a lot of snaps over the course of the last 2 weeks with Smallwood out. DeMarco Murray, going to be a game-time decision. Patrick Peterson's going to play over in London and probably shut down Sammy Watkins, making Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods very nice plays. Mohamed Sanu is going to be back in the Sunday Nighter and a great play against the Patriots' lackluster defense. Jordan Matthews is back to practice with his thumb. It looks like he's going to play, so my initial talk earlier in the week of Brandon Tate and Zay Jones potentially garnering a lot of targets may go down here. I'm not saying smash Jordan Matthews because, a thumb injury could really prevent his ability to catch the ball. However, he's a very nice price on DraftKings for a guy that should see between 6 and 9 targets. I like that spot. I still think that the best Bills receiving option you can use is Nick O'Leary at $3,100 because we know that the tight end is such a focal point for Tyrod Taylor and that Bills offense when they're not throwing to LaShawn McCoy or handing the ball off to LaShawn McCoy, which is most of the time, so it doesn't leave a lot to go around for any of the other receiving options. So O'Leary would be the highest for me in that situation. Kenny Britt looks like he's going to play in a revenge game against the Titans. Rob Kelly looks like he'll be on the field with an ankle injury, like Chris Thompson, the best in that backfield, but I do like Kelly over Pirine. Demaryius Thomas leg issue, looks like he's going to be fine. Like I mentioned, Ben Watson will play for the Baltimore Ravens against the Minnesota Vikings. One other note, Stefan Diggs is going to be out for the Vikings, so upgrade Adam Thielen wherever possible. I don't care if it's a bad matchup. Thielen's just good. Use Adam Thielen. Don't worry about it, all right? Coming up next, Ryan Hodge will be on the line to give some more color to some of these injuries and where they create pivot plays on DraftKings and potential pickups in your season-long lineups. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Pat Mayo Experience. Now digging into the fansharesports.com sentiment rankings. We're going to sort by start tags. Well, myself and Ryan Hodge. Hodge, what's up, man? How'd you do last week?
I did okay, man. You win some, you lose some. Last week wasn't my best week, so we're on to week 7, baby.
So I guess the big thing to talk about, we're going to go position by position here, and we'll start with running back. So just right off the top, the most tagged in terms of start running back of Week 7 right now on DraftKings is LaShawn McCoy. He has 24 start tags. He's followed by Adrian Peterson, Jay Ajayi, Mark Ingram, Jerick McKinnon, Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, Carlos Hyde, Leonard Fournette, and remember this is from the week, this isn't just today, and then Melvin Gordon. I guess the big two things that we're going to really focus on here in terms of injury is Leonard Fournette and DeMarco Murray, because Leonard Fournette hasn't practiced all week. He says he's going to play, but it's very, in my mind, like I don't see a reason to put him out there. He's your best offensive player. You're playing the Colts, a game where your defense should be able to handle most of the heavy lifting for you. Jags go on bye next week. Like, make sure that Fournette is healthy. If you have any chance of making the playoffs, you sit Fournette here unless he's absolutely okay, which if he was, he wouldn't be sitting out practice the entire week. That leaves Chris Ivory at $4,900 as a pretty enticing play. And then with DeMarco Murray, he got into limited practice on Friday. He's a game time decision. We're not going to know about either one of these guys until it comes down to the wire Sunday. Fortunately, they both play in the 1 o'clock slate, so we're going to know before having to make any drastic decisions. But at that point, Derrick Henry becomes like a smash play in the mid $5,000 area. So I guess this kind of goes one of two ways. If we don't know until Sunday, let's say both guys get ruled out as a part of the inactives, we find out around 11:30 a.m. on Sunday. Do you think that both those guys become chalk plays, even in cash games, or not, because it happened so late in the morning?
Yeah, if it happens late, I definitely think their ownership will be a little suppressed. If it happens earlier, I think, like you said, they're going to end up being smash plays. Derrick Henry is a very violent runner. There's some film speak for you. He's seen a lot of A-plus defenders in the box over the course of the last couple starts, and he's still having an extremely high success rate against those 8 or more defenders in the box, turning things out like 5.5 yards per carry. Last Monday Night Football, he had 6.9 yards per carry, and he was seeing 8-plus guys in the box like 45% of the time. So he's a very good play. And then Ivory is going to be more of a probably chalk by volume play, not chalk by talent play, if that makes any sense. I think it's just opportunity and volume with him. And there's some other guys around that I still think you could pivot to in larger field formats and maybe get away from him if it's announced early.
Yeah, I think the guy that I would be targeting in that spot, if that turns out to be the case, I mean, everyone's kind of on Joe Mixon right now. That's sort of like a popular GPP play. But I really like Duke Johnson, $4,900 with Deshaun Kaiser back.
Yeah, I actually think Kaiser-Duke stacks are going to go way under owned this week. I actually like Duke Johnson in cash, $4,900. Hopefully we'll go back to his 7 targets-ish that he was averaging per game with Kaiser under center and see a few rush attempts. I mean, he was getting goal line looks over the past couple weeks too, so I really like that call on Duke Johnson.
So when it comes to the absolute kind of chalk in these large field tournaments, the top in tags, McCoy, Peterson, and Ajayi, do you think it kind of plays itself out that way? I mean, let's just throw out the Ivory and let's throw out Derrick Henry for the moment because we're not sure on their status and whether or not people are going to move all the way onto them, which, I mean, I probably will end up doing if at least one of them if I need to save the money. But do you think that Shady's really going to be that highly owned? Like,
no.
It would surprise me if he was.
I don't. I actually think what you're seeing here with Fanshare Sports is you're getting a lot of industry talk around him, and that's generating these tags. But I think the public won't be on him as much as Fanshare is leaning to. This might be one of the one time they're very, very good at what they do, and he still might come in higher owned than you would want in like a large field or like a single bullet type entry. But I don't think he like shoots through the roof at like some 40% ownership or anything like that.
No, in my mind, I would wager that Adrian Peterson and or Mark Ingram or Ajayi would end up being the highest owned guy, which is kind of nuts because Melvin Gordon should probably be the highest owned guy, shouldn't he?
I think Melvin Gordon is like the perfect pivot off of all of these guys. His usage is Le'Veon Bell-esque when it comes to snaps, goal line work, targets, just the amount of pure touches that he's seeing. It's up there with Le'Veon Bell. So I think he's a perfect pivot. And when you see him down there at the bottom of page 1 with 23 mentions or 23 tags on Fanshare, that's the pivot that you want. I'm all about that.
Yeah, and you talked about sort of the Kaiser-Duke Johnson stack. I think another stack that you can look at in this spot with the Broncos down 2 offensive linemen, Chargers D, Melvin Gordon. Hopefully the D sets up short fields, and boom, it's all Melvin Gordon all the time. I mean, it's weird that he's not the top of the sentiment rankings with people around the industry, mainly because he's been the highest producing guy the last 2 weeks. It seems kind of crazy to me.
And that's where I think, going back to what I was saying with McCoy, people are reading into this narrative coming off of a bye, should be fully healthy. We really like Tyrod this week. They're at home type of a thing. And I think that's shooting his tags up Meanwhile, Melvin Gordon, yet again, is just flying underneath the radar with a 35-point ceiling. So,
yeah. What about someone like, if we go to the top, it seems like at week's beginning, Ezekiel Elliott was sort of like the smash play, but then it became really difficult to afford him and still like the rest of your roster because it was so hard to pay down at running back or at any sort of positions where it felt comfortable. Do you have any idea if you think it's like Zeke's going to be higher owned than Bell or Bell higher owned than Zeke? Because if I was putting money on it, I would put money on Ezekiel Elliott being higher owned. And well, I love the matchup. I love the pace of that game. It now has the highest over-under of any of the Sunday games. Le'Veon Bell's just a better player.
yeah, and Pittsburgh is at home. Cincinnati is okay against opposing teams' running backs. They rank right around the middle in adjusted fantasy points allowed or schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. I will say if everything stays as is and Murray, let's say, plays and Fournette plays, I think that will drive Elliott's ownership down. But if we get value plays like Henry, like Ivory, I think that actually drives Elliott's ownership up because people are going to be able to afford that number one running back in their roster this week.
Well, he has a ton of tags. Carlos Hyde actually falls right next to Adrian Peterson in terms of the pricing. One's at $5,900, one's at $5,800. And, well, people say they're going to play Carlos Hyde. I don't think the people are going to play Carlos Hyde. And I think people still remember 2 weeks ago that he ended up in the split situation. And then, they'll probably overlook last week where it was all Carlos Hyde all the time. But he's the one getting all the touches from inside the 5-yard line. And I know Andre Ellington is expected to be out now. So it looks like Adrian Peterson might be a lock and load play, but I mean, he's never been a great receiving back. If they get down in this game against the Rams, just because Andre Ellington isn't there doesn't mean they're not going to bring in another running back to be the primary pass catcher. So I think I like Hyde more than I like Peterson in this spot, and you might be able to get him for like a fifth of the ownership.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that at one point last week, the Cardinals were up by 3 touchdowns, right? Or wasn't it? It was like 24-0 at one point for them. So I think Peterson, yeah, he looked really good. He looked re-energized. I think Hyde is the far better player. Hyde is up there with Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley touches with inside the 5. He actually leads the NFL with touches inside the 5-yard line. And he has like just about 17 or 18 with inside the 10 and 20. So he's seeing that touchdown equity that we really want. When you're looking for guys in some of these large field tournaments, you need touchdowns to ship these things. And if you don't think a guy has multi-touchdown upside, you probably shouldn't be looking at him that closely. Hyde has it. I don't think Adrian Peterson does.
Well, I think my single favorite pivot play of the week, and I know he's expensive, but when I started looking at all the tags and who people are playing, this guy came in at number 22 at running back in most startable in terms of people talking him up, and it's Todd Gurley. It seems kind of crazy to me that Todd Gurley would go from being like everyone's favorite smash play like 2 weeks ago to no one's owning him this week. He's significantly cheaper than the top 2 guys. I know that there's the Malcolm Brown problems, or Tavon Austin might steal a touchdown, or whoever that guy was last week they threw the shovel pass to off off the Gurley misdirection. But I know the Cardinals' run defense is all right, but I think that Todd Gurley can do enough, especially through the passing game as well, that I think I would rather take a chance on his upside and his volume, even in that London game, and maybe even pair him up with the Rams defense, who I really like this week against Arizona, and just go with that if he's going to be like 3% owned.
Yeah, I wrote up Todd Gurley as my favorite leverage play on the field this week when it comes to tournaments. He's still getting the work with inside the red zone, 7 or 5 touches with inside the 5, and really the thing is he found the 100-yard mark last week, so he got you the bonus. He touched the ball 23 times. He just wasn't involved in the passing game, which is a little disappointing on a full-point PPR site like DraftKings. He should go back to that, though. I think his usage there was just a little egregious by the coaching staff. So I love him as a pivot play. He's not being literally, if you go to fansharesports.com, you click on running back, you filter by position. He's not on the first page. I don't even think he's on the second page if you're filtering by running back only. So I think he ends up being like T62. Nobody's talking about him. Perfect leverage play.
All right, let's switch to receivers, and we might need to find a decent pivot off the most tagged receiver in terms of starts of Week 7. It's Robert Woods. I loved Robert Woods going into the week, and this is one of these situations where Do you eat the chalk or do you find somewhere else to go? And I mean, I don't think that just because a guy's a chalk play, that necessarily makes him a bad play. Sometimes the guys are talked up for a reason, that they're going to have a good game, and you lock and load them and find somewhere else to differentiate. But Robert Woods right now with 21 tags for starts this week. That's more than Julio, who's not even on the main slate, and Pierre Garçon and Demaryius Thomas. Like, I like Robert Woods. I like the opportunity. Patrick Peterson looks like he's going to play. You expect him to be on Sammy Watkins in this matchup, and we know that the wide receiver 2s and 3s have lit up the Cardinals in recent weeks. I get all the narrative behind Robert Woods, but at $4,000, if he's going to be like 20% owned, does it make more logical sense to find someone else in that area to pivot onto, whether it be Cooper Kupp on the same team, who's getting more red zone targets than him, or even someone like Ted Ginn, who's been pretty good every single week, and no one's really talking about him?
Yeah, I like both of the receivers that you mentioned as pivots in Kupp and Ginn. I also think Eric Decker is $300 more than Robert Woods this week and is a really good pivot play. Just from a salary standpoint, he should see a decent amount of targets. He saw some work last week in Monday Night Football. And we all know what, he has 2 touchdown upside when they get down there. So I really like Eric Decker at $4,300.
I don't know if I can. I guess with Delaney Walker looking like he's not going to play now, maybe Eric Decker can absorb some of the same sort of like targets that Delaney Walker would get in a similar circumstance. Maybe they'll run a jet sweep with Eric Decker like the Titans were trying to do on Monday night, which just seems asinine. But in that range, I feel like people watch. It's weird. I feel like the primetime slates influence what happens the following week, and people saw Decker be very good on Monday night, and that might lead to a bit more ownership. I think in tournament play, while I always prefer him indoors, I always prefer the Saints indoors, I think the upside of Ted Ginn just might be higher.
Yeah, Ted Ginn absolutely has a higher ceiling than Eric Decker. But that's because they come off those huge ADOT targets, right? He's generating a lot of air yards, and a lot of those are going to come off of like a big 60-point or a big 60-yard busted coverage type play. I think Eric Decker still gets you there in regards of having multi-touchdown upside at a similar price point. But to be quite honest, there's a guy who's a lot cheaper with Sanders out now. You're looking at Benny Fowler, but he's also being talked up a lot now too. So his ownership could end up being more. I'm just talking relative to these tags, getting away from Robert Woods in large field tournaments.
Would you still use him in cash games, do you think?
Woods or Fowler?
Woods. Or would you just go down to Fowler?
Honestly, like personally, I'm not using like the way that I'm currently constructing cash game lineups. I have a bunch of 58 and 6K wide receivers. I think there's way too many good options in there, like Demaryius Thomas. Guys like those guys are moving up to Adam Thielen. Like I really like a lot of those guys. So I'm not dipping down into this lower price range. I don't think you need to with roster construction this week on DraftKings.
Okay, if you go through the entire sentiment tags, Robert Woods, like I mentioned, is number 1. Julio Jones, number 2, but of course he's not on the main slate, so we're not going to worry too much about him. He's not going to suck away ownership from a lot of these guys for the Millionaire Maker field. Then we're looking at Pierre Garçon, 17 start tags, Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, Jarvis Landry, Benny Fowler, Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, and then A.J. Green. It's weird to hear Dez Bryant, Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, and A.J. Green, they're all getting talked up, but of course you can't own all of these guys. They're just too high priced, and I think A.J. Green is becoming sort of the split player in all of this. It seems like people are going all in on him because they think that he's going to be highly owned, and people don't like the spot against him. He has the most sit tags of any of those guys all week. Do you think that his ownership ends up being double digits just because there's enough people building up a case as him as a contrarian play that as all of a sudden it turns out that he's not a contrarian play anymore?
Yeah, I think him getting to double digits is going to be a little bit more price related. I think as people are building out their lineups, you have Antonio Brown, who's at $8,900, and then you have A.J. Green, who has very similar multi-touchdown upside, sees a lot of slant routes, but also sees a lot of high ADOT targets as well. So I think people just kind of get to A.J. based on salary alone, and that's what will push him into like that 13-14% ownership.
You mentioned DT in cash. Are you worried that he's been dealing with the mysterious leg injury all week? It looks like he's going to play, but does that concern you at all?
No, I was looking at some of the Broncos beat reporters and what they were just saying throughout practice and like doing some live tweets on him in practice, and he was making good cuts. He was running full speed. Everything looked good according to the eye test. I think it's something to continue to monitor, but this is one of those things where I think we can look at like Devontae Adams in week 5 where team said he was playing. He got the start. He was medically cleared concussion-wise for Devontae Adams. It's a little bit different. But if he's playing, he's playing, and his price point is fantastic at $5,800. I think Pierre Garçon's price point at $5,800 is also a really good price point. But I'm good with Demaryius Thomas. I'm locking him in cash as it stands.
The other Broncos receivers, you mentioned Benny Fowler. He's getting talked up big time. But there's still concerns about Trevor Siemian's shoulder, too, right now. Like, I think, and I mentioned this with Siege on the Wednesday show, that if people are just going to go to Benny Fowler, why not just drop down $300 more and go with Jordan Taylor?
I think it's absorbing targets with Fowler, and they're seeing him. Yeah, didn't he see more targets than Taylor to begin with? So I think that's what it is. But as you're kind of building that narrative and talking about like what you think the public is going to do, you make an excellent case for just pivoting over to Taylor.
All right, well, what about high-end pivots right now? Because at the outset of the week, I thought that Jordy Nelson would come in very, very much under-owned, but people seemingly like the price, and some people seem to be, I don't want to say sold on the Green Bay offense, but sold that it's not going to be a complete wasteland, that Jordy can still do stuff here. But it was Davante Adams who seemed to have the eye of Hundley last week. No one's talking up Davante Adams. Does he make a good tournament play, or is there just not enough upside to go with him? Because I like the matchup against the Saints, especially if Jordy can get shut down at all. Davante might just be there running around wide open.
Yeah, I think what's important to remember with Adams and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb is you have Hundley under center, right? So it's going to limit a lot of their upside just due to the fact that he's going to get a whole week with the ones. He obviously saw a lot of time with them in that game on Sunday with the ones. Hundley has looked great in the preseason. Adams is also, isn't he he's $5,800 on DraftKings as well, right? Like he's right there at that price point with all these other wide receivers. And that's what I was saying is I love that tier of wide receivers. I think Adams is a great play. I absolutely think that he is, even regardless of if it's, Hundley under center or Aaron Rodgers was obviously he's out for 8 weeks. So I like Adams.
With Stefon Diggs being ruled out and Baltimore's defense being pretty good against the pass, do you have any concerns about Adam Thielen, or am I just being like, you know what, I'm locking him in for the second straight week. He's going to get like 15 targets. Let's not worry about this?
Yeah, and Thielen has absolutely amazing hands. Like he has Crabtree-type-esque hands where he's just catching the ball. He's seeing a lot of efficient targets as well. So, yeah, I really, really like Thielen regardless of the matchup this week. I want those 15 targets, and $6,700 is not a bad price for the amount of volume he's going to get.
The only other player that I'll mention for large tournament play, with Fournette dealing with an injury, there's a guy that historically kills the Colts on the Jacksonville side of the ball, and he's only $4,100. It's a very easy pivot off of Robert Woods and right up to Allen Hurns. Do you dig that at all?
I have Hurns listed as like my 4th or 5th best tournament wide receiver play this week on my cheat sheet. So I absolutely love Allen Hurns.
So you're in. So that might be the move then in tournaments.
Yeah.
Just don't use Woods, use Allen Hurns, and be done with it.
Yes.
All right, let's switch to quarterbacks. Tyrod. Tyrod, everyone said, was super sneaky coming into the week, and he got so sneaky that now he's just standing right in front of you, and everyone's talking about him, calling him a great play. I was down with Tyrod based on his floor. I still like him in cash, actually, just because I do think that he has a really nice floor, but it's Tyrod Taylor, 34 start tags this week, followed by Dak Prescott with 30, then Mariota, Brady, Hundley, Breeze, Goff, Ryan, Beathard, and then Carson Wentz. Obviously, you can't use Wentz, you can't use Brady, and Matt Ryan. They're all on the primetime slate, so that's going to even consolidate ownership even more. I was digging Tyrod Taylor, but I don't know if I dig him as much as the chalk guy at $5,100. Siege was making the case to me on Wednesday about Kaiser over Taylor. Now, I like Taylor objectively in that spot if you were just to throw pricing and ownership out the window, but is pivoting to Kaiser something you can do if no one's going to own him?
I also think you could probably pivot to Blake Bortles too. So I think maybe I'll hit up Siege and we'll get a little Kaiser Bortles side action going here. I think Deshaun is a great pivot. I think Blake Bortles at $4,700 on the road against Indianapolis. Indianapolis ranks like 28th, 29th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. If Fournette is out, I think we see a shift from, like, they just won't be able to run the ball as much as they want to, and that's always been the concern with Bortles is volume and attempts. I think we could see some more attempts out of Blake Bortles, and that's a good thing, right? We get that fourth quarter garbage time Blake Bortles. Kaiser, like Siege said, another great pivot. Like I said in the beginning of the show, Kaiser Duke Johnson stacks are probably one of my favorite things to do this week. But I also just want to reiterate, Tyrod Taylor is a good play. If you're fading him from a pure ownership standpoint. And it's also important to remember, like, Tyrod's floor is good, and his ceiling is also pretty up there. I think 30-point games out of him are not out of the realm. What I do have a hard time doing is, like, if you think you get a 30-point Tyrod game, you're probably not getting a 30-point McCoy game. So you're looking at, like, naked Tyrod, I think, in those stacks.
I think that the only player that you would want to stack him with, because it looks like Jordan Matthews is going to return from his thumb injury, so you have those three receivers that are like $3,700, $3,600, and $3,500 in Matthews, Zay Jones, and Brandon Tate. You probably just avoid them and go with the $3,100 Nick O'Leary and just be on your way, and hopefully that he's the one that has the big game replacing Charles Clay. That would be my mindset around it, because you're using Tyrod to save all the money, so why not just double down on saving money and then pay up everywhere else?
Yeah, I think that's a question of how many lineups are you making? Are you doing 50 in the Millionaire Maker? Or are you doing $3 and $150 3 lineups and a 3 max $150? If you're doing the 50, I think that's totally viable. If you're doing the 3, I want naked Tyrod. Like, I don't think I even want to take a chance on a 0.5% guy like that when I'm only firing 3 lineups.
Okay, what about the only other quarterback that I really like this week that doesn't seem to be talked up at all is Russell Wilson. He's very few starts. He has a sit tag. It seems like everyone's just going over that region, that if they're going to go to quarterback, they're going to pay up for Mariota or Dak, or they're going to pay all the way down for someone like Tyrod. Why not take a shot on Russell Wilson here? It's not like the Giants' defense has been lights out so far, and I feel like although Jimmy Graham is a really nice stack to go with him against the Giants' defense, you could play Russell Wilson by himself and just hope it pans out.
Yeah, you could definitely do Russell naked. I think Jimmy Graham's price point at sub 5Ks at $4,900 is going to be a popular stack to do with him. I think Doug Baldwin comes in a little under-owned in regards to a stack perspective. So I think you can look at doing both of those guys. Russell Wilson's probably one of my favorite quarterbacks this week. The Giants aren't generating a ton of pass rush. Seattle's moved around their offensive line and have been not allowing as many hurries and sacks as they were in weeks 1 through 3. So I like Wilson. Then obviously we know he's got his rushing upside. So Wilson's a great pivot. And he's kind of in a no man's land price point, right? Like, you have Dak at 7,300. And then, like you said, you got Brady and like Matt Ryan. They're not even on this slate. So he's in this weird no man's price point, which will help suppress his ownership.
Do you have any love for Brett Hundley here?
I think going back to like a pivot off of Tyrod, I think Brett Hundley comes in under-owned. I talked about how good he was in the preseason earlier. He's probably played somewhere around like 4.5 games, 5 games-ish. He's got 10 touchdowns in those games. Didn't turn the ball over a lot, and now he gets all the upside in those huge wide receivers. It's kind of a reverse effect. The wide receivers take a little bit of a hit because they're not getting thrown the ball from Aaron Rodgers, but Hundley is getting a great boost because now he doesn't get to target Jeff Janis. Sorry, Davis. He gets to target Jordy Nelson and things of that nature in a regular season game. So I do like Hundley a lot, and I think he's cash viable.
All right, let's switch to tight ends, and the most talked up tight end of the week now looks like he's trending in the direction of not playing. No practice for Delanie Walker on Friday, which means he's probably going to sit. That's generally how these things go. Don't practice Friday, don't play on Sunday. Again, where they play on the short week, and a lot like DeMarco Murray and the Jags team, they have a bye next week. So if there is actual problems, get the guy healthy. You're playing the Cleveland Browns. Hopefully you can just eke out a win with your other guys, but that's going to leave an awful lot of salary distribution to a lot of the other tight ends, because he was sort of like the lock and load chalky tight end of the week. Now that falls on the shoulders of Jimmy Graham, who we just talked about. He's second in those rankings. And then it goes George Kittle, Kyle Rudolph, Hunter Henry, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Austin Hooper on the primetime slate, Evan Ingram, Gronk on the primetime slate, and then my main man, Nick O'Leary. So it looks like Jimmy Graham's going to come in very popular. If you're paying down at tight end, it seems like George Kittle is the move that you want to go to. People are digging the extra snaps for Hunter Henry right now. But I think if it was me, do you have any interest in Jonnu Smith if Delanie Walker sits? He's been playing over 50% of the snaps with Walker active. People are talking about Super Knob, but he's playing a lot of special team snaps. Of course, he'll see an increase, but it seems like Smith would be the way to go, and he's only $2,600. I don't know if I would go with him in cash because you don't need to, but if there's a way to save money doing the Mariota-Smith stack, maybe throw some Rashard Matthews and or Decker in there too, depending on what you want to do. But is that viable whatsoever, or is that just getting a bit too tricky?
Yeah, I think with him too, you should go back and take a look and see how many pass routes he's running versus blocking snaps that he's seeing with that. And he's about half and half, so he's blocking a little bit I think it's important to remember in week 5, George Kittle blew up. He had like a 20-point game. And a lot of sharp people got onto him because they were looking at the tight end landscape and are like, this is just trash. I don't want anything to do with these high-priced guys, and I want nothing to do with these guys in the 4K range. And that pushed a lot of people onto Kittle. We could see that with Smith this week. I'm a little disappointed that Delaney Walker's not playing. With him seeing so many tags, I was kind of excited for him to be highly owned and end up being bad chalk. I wasn't really on him. I think Jimmy Graham is a much better play, about $1,000 cheaper. Kittle is running an absurd amount of pass routes. He's an athletic freak. You've heard Evan Silva talk about his spark score, things of that nature. And then Hunter Henry's kind of the one guy who's like in a no man's land, and Denver is not very good against tight ends. So I really like Hunter Henry this week.
I think the way that I would go, now that it looks like Sterling Shepard is going to suit up, I think that Evan Ingram is going to have a lot of room to run around, and he could hit double-digit targets. I know it's against the Seahawks, but that is the one area where they're susceptible over the middle and up the seams. And, Evan Ingram's not blocking. He's only there to run pass routes, and it seems like he might come in at under ownership.
Yeah, and to be honest, Seattle's actually not very good at defending the tight end, just like you said. They rank 20th in schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the tight end. I'm all about Evan Ingram this week. I think he's a really good play. I actually really like doing Ingram-Graham tight end flex on DraftKings in like 20 max entries. I think it really helps you get on a unique lineup, and both of those guys are in really good spots, and both of them carry some pretty decent touchdown equity.
All right, let's get to defenses. This is where the money was made last week. If you had a crappy defense, then you didn't win any money because the defenses did all the scoring. Now, that's probably not going to continue to persist week to week to week as defense is highly volatile. And again, I'm just really targeting teams with great pass rushes versus teams with bad offensive lines. And I think the big one to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, the Chargers defense, top 5 in adjusted sack rate in terms of defensive line. The Broncos are down 2 starters, and we're in the bottom 8 of adjusted sack rate in terms of offensive line to begin with. That seems like a really good matchup, and they only come in as the 8th most talked up defense. Now, that could change now that this news has come out, but if you go to the very top of the sentiment rankings, we're looking at the Vikings, 14 start tags, the Saints, 13 coming off their monster week, the Buffalo Bills, Jags, Titans, Dolphins, Seahawks, Chargers, Rams, and Panthers. My sleeper defense this week is the Chicago Bears. I really like their pass rush. Cam can turn the ball over. Cam not afraid to get sacked. He tries to buy extra time in the pocket, and that leads to him going down a lot. I don't think you need to go chalk defense, but I guess my big question to you is, do you think people will actually pay up for the Jags where they're so expensive because it's a hard week to save money? And if that's the case, and you can get them for sub 10%, would that be a nice contrarian move to go to a defense?
Yeah, I actually, like, you hit the nail on the head with pricing being a little bit tight and people not being able to spend on whatever they want, wherever they want. That should probably have them come in a little under-owned. Defenses generally are one of those things, like in the Millionaire Maker, you see quarterbacks they never push like this really high ownership. And you don't tend to see that a lot with defenses on most slates. So I think that you can get Jacksonville a little under-owned. I don't usually try and worry about ownership with defenses. I think one of my favorite things to do, and you had mentioned this earlier, is just the Chargers and Melvin Gordon are just in a great correlation spot, especially with Simeon potentially having like an iffy shoulder. I think the Chargers are in a really good spot, and they are so cheap. I think that's going to drive their ownership up, but I still really like them. I think they're in a good spot for cash, and I really like doing it with Melvin Gordon in tournaments.
Yeah, I actually have them as part of my main cash team right now, and I've been constructing it. Originally, I had Gurley in the Rams defense, and I was like, you know what? I'll just go Melvin in the Chargers defense and worry about Gurley in the Rams defense and more tournament play. But I do like the Rams a lot as a defense. They're also super cheap, and that's really the best part about the Bears. They're $2,200, that they allow you so much flexibility at other positions, and I think that their baseline is pretty good. They've been really good on defense this year, and no one's really noticed.
Yeah, they've been sneaky good generating a lot of hurries. My only concern is Cam tends to extend those hurries and make them not into sacks and into like short yardage gains. But for $2,200, like, I just think you have to. It's really important to get off the chalk on defense because it's such a volatile position. So if it's going to be the Saints, if it's going to be the Bills, like, I think you should just move away from them. We see it happen every single week where the chalk doesn't hit or doesn't do what we expect it to do, and somebody like the Rams or the Chicago Bears come in underowned and put up 25-point games.
Yeah, I mean, the same logic that has got me onto the Bears was the same logic that I used last week with the Saints when they turned out. I mean, no one expected the Saints to have that big of a game, but that's sort of the upside of what happens when you just generate so much pressure on the quarterback. And you're right, Cam Newton can extend these plays, but that his ability to want to extend the plays, well, sometimes he turns them into short gains or little dump-offs. It also leaves him more susceptible to getting sacked as well. It's a lot like Tyrod Taylor. Like, Tyrod's going to stick around, try to buy some time, but it leads to him being sacked more than you're just, statuesque quarterbacks who just stand there and get rid of the ball if there's any pressure.
Right. Nope, totally agree.
Any love for bringing up Tyrod Taylor, I know that the Bucs defense is kind of decimated right now, and they're not getting the pass rush that many of us expected coming into the year. Are they a sneaky play against Tyrod? If everyone's going to use Tyrod, clearly no one's going to use the Bucs defense, or is that just too much?
Yeah, I think that might be getting a little bit too cute, but it's a huge leverage play on the field. If you actually think Tyrod Taylor is going to come in at some 35% ownership in these large field tournaments, using Tampa Bay is just a huge leverage. Like massive leverage. You make up an insane amount of ground on the field that way. If he ends up having a bad game, and he has a bad game because they're getting, fumbles and they're doing pick sixes and things of that nature where it's hurting Tyrod, it's keeping Tyrod off the field, and you're generating points with Tampa that way.
Final guy I wanted to talk about, swing back to running back for a second because I totally forgot to bring him up, and I do like him this week. I actually even considered him using in cash games just based on his PPR floor and everything that I just kind of mentioned about the Bears' defense, getting to Cam quickly, forcing him to get the ball out quickly. Is Christian McCaffrey a good play here? Because no one's really talking about him.
Yeah, I think he's going to go super, super underowned. Chicago's been pretty good against your stereotypical 20 rush type running back, but we know that that's not Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey's seeing 10 targets out of the backfield, but he's only actually rushing the ball, 3 or 4 times. So I don't think you can look at your standard DVOA or schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed in that perspective, which should bring his ownership down. People will see Chicago's top half in the league against opposing teams' running backs. Well, Christian McCaffrey's not your typical running back, so I think that helps drive his ownership down, and he ends up being a little sneaky.
All right, Ryan Hodge, you can follow him on Twitter @Ryan Hodge, and tell everyone where they can find all of your work, not just some of your work, all of your work.
You can find all my work over at powerhourpod.com and 4for4.com. That's what I call home, so that's where you can find me.
All right, thanks for being on the show once again. Of course, we're going to have you back. I mean, you have the best internet connection and video of anyone I know. You have to be back.
I look forward to it, man. Thank you for having me on, Pat.
No problem. You can follow me on Twitter @ThePME. Remember to check out my updated DraftKings cheat sheet, which I will update again after the inactives on Sunday morning to check that out so you can see where I'm leaning right now and see how that switches once the inactives come out. You can also catch me on DKTV on the DraftKings Facebook page at 11 a.m. Sunday as we talk through and do the live inactives. Then I'll go update all my standard rankings for season long, and then the DK cheat sheet, that's all up on DKPlaybook.com. Don't be afraid to give the video a like either. It's never something that hurts. You can subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience on the DraftKings YouTube page for the video version. On the DK Live app, you can watch it. And for the uncut, uncensored, always free audio versions, iTunes, Stitcher, Audio Boom, and Google Play. Whatever device you have, I got you covered, all right? I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck in Week 7. I'll see you next time.